Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, my video is a day early this week because on Thursday into Thursday night I'll be on travel for work and I wouldn't be able to get until really late to get the video produced. And I've had a good chance today on Wednesday to really start to assess what I think is a quite important pattern shift. And it starts with a quick analysis of last week. So the map you've been looking at here shows the last 7 days of accumulated precipitation. And for the first time in, gosh, you got to go all the way back to December, we were actually able to get upper level flow to come out of the south and west. And that's what helped to draw on that moisture, set up that deformation band, and return a lot of precipitation into this area. Now, why I'm hung up on this is because we haven't seen flow like that in a while, and we're not seeing it in the near term, because in the near term, we've gone back into a ridge that's bringing a lot of this flow over the north and west. And the problem is that's going to add to an area that's already in drought stress. But the analysis that I've been working on here is to try to understand if there is actually a significant shift coming up in this pattern. So I want to talk about that because it's going to have big implications for the west, big implications for the southern plains and the Midwest, and those are areas that we need to start bringing in the moisture. Now we continue to assess it this way, and this is looking at 40 centimeter or 16-inch soil moisture, and this is in percent. Now when we look at this, just remember this is an experimental product from NASA. It's not observed. It's a modeled data set here, but it still shows the overall pattern. We have a broad area through here where it's quite dry. The west has gone back over very dry. I'll show you that in a second. And where we've recently brought in some of the heavy precipitation, a lot of that's still sitting in snow over this area and will melt and get in to the ground. But it's this region in through here, through the western Corn Belt and the plains, that I really want to see some improvement, because since the start of this year, you're looking at precipitation ranks. We have a few different areas that are having a record dry start to the year. I'm thinking about this area in Nebraska and nearby surrounding climate reporting districts. I'm also thinking about California and Nevada. Now, we've also been quite dry in the upper Midwest, and there's still this region in through here. We talked about this on Monday that is snow-free. And earlier this week, I was giving a talk down in St. Augustine, and this is just crazy to think about. But when I flew from St. Augustine to where I am tonight in Sioux Falls, I got here yesterday, and the temperature in Sioux Falls was 55 degrees in sunshine. Where I left St. Augustine, it was 51 in rain. How often in February do you get to say that? But we need to know, is the pattern that's getting us in this position going to shift? Because the west needs it to shift in a big way. I just want to show you 3 different areas across the west. The first, this is the Northern Sierra 8-station precipitation index. You can see the stations here. Now, we were on pace with some of the wettest years on record, 82, 83, 2016, 17, and that just flatlined through the month of January. You see right into there. We haven't made a dent in this at all. In fact, it was one of the driest stretches on record during the wet season throughout the Sierra Nevada. We can go south of there down to the San Joaquin region, same story. And now this particular area is below the climatological average, as is the Tulare Basin down here even farther, where you can see that this area needs to begin its recovery quickly to get back on pace. Now, if that's my setup, here's the question that I'm going to ask. I've made a case throughout much of this winter that I believe that most of the interaction, the teleconnections, the things that are driving the position of the mid-latitude jet stream are happening in the tropics. And so I'll just give you a quick review. In December, you can see here that the MJO spent a lot of time in Phase 6 and then moved to Phase 7, where it was also there at the beginning of January. Then it moved into Phase 8 and then collapsed right back into null space. What is very unique now is that for the first time during this cold season, in fact, you got to go back before November, the MJO has popped back out over here in the Indian Ocean. And the forecast you'll see in a few moments are to sweep it around, finally letting it move through phases 3, 4, and 5. And I'll make that case again in a few seconds. What's important about this is I'm going to take you back to this time period in December when the MJO was over in the Western Pacific. And I want to kind of give you just a little bit more information about this, okay? This is what the Pacific jet stream did. And what I'm most interested in is what happens across Asia. Do you see how there's a trough here and just weak flow, and then it goes quite strong across Japan, but it doesn't extend too far into the Pacific for its split, and the split began here and here. What was important about that split was that the ridge, okay, see it, was over the Aleutian Islands, extending into the western side of the Gulf of Alaska. That allowed the pattern to come back together, and throughout December, we just targeted California, targeted the Pacific Northwest. And this is what dominated our jet stream pattern. We were at times able to get southwest flow. Unfortunately, that brought in 2 major severe weather events into the Mid-South and Midwest. That was on December 10th and December 15th. But all of that was because of the behavior of the MJO during that time period. Okay? Now, what we need to understand about this is that the MJO works by monitoring where those kind of biggest thunderstorm and largest areas of convection are across the tropics. And if you've never seen this before, this comes from NOAA, and I'm going to play it for you. I just want to show you something. What we watch here is the eastward progression of the MJO through several phases. Phase 1 starting here, phase 8 finishing out here in the middle of the Pacific. Watch it again. So we're phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see how it goes across here. We're watching this. Don't look at the image over here right now. Let's keep an eye on this one. Now what I want to show you is this. When we are in phase 7, look at the impact when the MJO is here on the Pacific jet stream. It's very strong in this region right in through here. Okay, it tends to be weaker over in this area. Now, we saw that when the MJO was in phase 7. Let me take you back over there. In the month of December, we saw this. But what's going on right now is the MJO collapsed, and it's going to emerge, or it has already emerged. Let's get back over here into phase 3. Now, what does phase 3 do? Whoops, I'm going to pause that, sorry. Phase 3, let's take you back over here, is where the MJO is in this part of the Indian Ocean, and you get an extended jet in this area. And if that jet can extend far enough, it can punch through the block that's set up in January off the west coast. And if we have a look, the MJO is currently out here, partly into phase 2. It's going to come out at higher amplitude into phase 3 and swivel through phase 4 and 5. And that is the breakthrough that I'm looking for, because we've not been here since November, and we were here in December, January, and now we're coming out back in February. So what have we seen? The Pacific jet stream has changed. We now have a much longer and extended branch of the jet stream into this area. It is still, let me show you, split across the west. But what I'm trying to assess here is if this is going to be enough, this shift in the MJO, to break this apart. Now, the MJO is doing this. Right now, it's sitting in phase 3. See it? But can you actually start to see it moving? Possibly over toward phase 4, 5, and 6. So if those shifts happen, we need to look at what this does to all of the total, the net momentum in the atmosphere, and then see the results. So I'll show you this. Now, when we look at these graphics, I show them every once in a while. This is the vertical and zonal integral of angular momentum. So in other words, wherever you see the red colors, that's where there's more westward momentum, and where there's the kind of the bluish to green color, this area, that's where we have a pullback in momentum. The La Nina peaked some point in December to early January. And when it let go, this is what we got initially. That was the shift. So this is the letting go of the La Nina. And what it did was it robbed the momentum just north of it there. Well, since then, as we get here past this peak, all right, we've seen a bit of a shift back to more normal momentum around the tropics, and now we've started to lose it. And what's taken shape during that time period is an increase in momentum in the polar jet stream, way up here, which is going to affect North America. And the result of all of these shifts, I believe, will start to show up once we get past the middle of this month and toward the end of it. Now, it's Wednesday, so we don't yet have all the brand new long-range data. That's going to come out tomorrow night, and I'll keep you updated on that in my morning report. But let me show you what I think is going to happen here. Now, certainly through the end of this week, the ridge is still in place across the west, and we've got cold air that's going to come in here into the Great Lakes. We're even going to put a system that's going to come over to the east coast here. This will be early next week. So see that? There's a deep trough cutting through there. But what I'm watching is this, going out past Valentine's Day into the 15th, 16th, 17th. We'll talk about this system in a few moments. But take a look at this. Look at the depth of the trough here and watch the shift in Alaska. As we go past the 17th into the 18th, 19th, and 20th, what are the models doing? The models are no longer, look at the height lines. They're no longer predicting higher than average heights across the west. It's in the European, it's in the GFS. Yes, it's out there pretty far in the forecast, but there's a trough here and a trough there. And that's going to give us, when you have those low heights to the north, more zonal flow. That means more west to east than north to south. And that could be all related to this MJO transition that we're trying to figure out. So what are the models doing? Well, they're going to start with a big system that's going to come out midweek next week. But are they going to continue with that? Well, these are brand new data from what we call the CFSV2 weeklies. So this is the U.S. equivalent of the European long range. And just take a look at this. The end of the month, the 23rd through March 1st, the models are returning stronger onshore flow into the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. They have backed off on how dry it has been in the southern and high plains. Very active throughout. Look at this. This is the Midwest through the Mid-South, through the Great Lakes, through Ontario, and into Quebec. So that tells me that we've got much better zonal flow that's pulling out like this across the country. And into week 4, this would be the first week of March, we aren't seeing such strong signals, but it's important to know that where the models are keeping the driest conditions are where we're missing out on that subtropical component, which is here. But this is not nearly as dry of a signal as we have seen as of late, and I'm very encouraged by what I see down here in the southern plains. Now, what is the European model saying? Very similar stuff. This is week 3 out to March 1st. Look, just like the CFSV2 showed, wetter than average here, above average precipitation in this area, and a much weaker dry signal for California and normal precipitation for this drought region in through here. This is fantastic news. And even as we slide into the first week of March, we really don't see, strong signals pointing toward the continuation of the record dryness that we've been seeing. And that's what I really just wanted to convey to you in this video tonight here on Wednesday night. Now, we've got near-term things to think about, and I got to show you what that is. Now, we're going to talk about the pattern over the next 7 days, but can we be watching? I know it doesn't look like much, but this little feature right here, that is actually the source of the post-Valentine's Day winter storm event that could come out of the southern plains. And I want to show you where that's going to eventually be. So we go right back up to the upper levels of the atmosphere. Now we're already here looking at the GFS. I want to show you both models. So this is the GFS, very similar to the European. We've got this first big system here. Watch this. See that trough cutting through? That's going to bring in some cold air Friday night into Saturday here into the upper Midwest. And then that moves by Sunday over toward the East Coast. And we could be looking at an event here on Sunday into Monday. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. But by Sunday, see this little shortwave right there? That was the one that was way over here by Japan when I started this animation. And the models are letting that dive into the northwest. Now, why are they doing that? Well, the pattern is highly amplified in the Gulf of Alaska. In fact, you have a high over a low setup right here. So what ends up occurring here is that the net flow ends up doing something like that, which allows more northerly winds to take this trough and send it farther south. And I like that because that comes into the northwest. It then goes over the Intermountain West, deepens over parts of California, Arizona, New Mexico. And the ensembles have this by next, Wednesday, Thursday, coming out of that region. And you know what it does. If the flow does this, that southwest flow in this region, that draws in moisture here, and this will bring precipitation back to the west. That thing's then got to run up over this ridge. Now, does the pattern beyond that mimic what you saw in the European? Let's get out here to the 19th, the 20th. And what we see is we no longer see the biggest ridge sitting here. Lower heights have moved into these two areas, and that seems to be suppressing the probability of a massive ridge in this area. So that's a pretty consistent multi-model story. Well, talking about multi-models, let's go look now at what we've got when we compare the GFS to the European. So we have our first of a few clippers already sitting over Lake Superior, bringing some light snow and some stronger winds on the backside. As we play this forward, going through the day on Thursday, that first clipper in the GFS or in the European, it slowly just breaks apart and moves into the northeast and into Ontario and Quebec. Following it is this trough right here. That next clipper comes over the top of the ridge, dives through Lake Winnipeg, and eventually gets here near the Red River of the North, but more closer to the headwaters of the Mississippi. See, it's in both models. And as that comes down, you're like, well, why does it have rain on the backside? Well, that's because there's going to be some very mild air that's in place on the backside of this coming on some downslope flow. Well, that trough, look over here at the European, dives through Wisconsin, makes the turn, brings in some scattered rain to this part of the Midwest. We could also get some high pressure coming in behind it that's going to push up against the Rocky Mountains and give us some light snow in this area. Now this is through Saturday. Watch what happens as we play it on through the weekend and get into early next week. So this is noon on Sunday. And the models have attempted to take that trough that you saw sweeping through here. The GFS is much more aggressive. The 12Z was. The 18Z, which just came out, is not. But it was much more aggressive at keeping a tighter low closer to the coastline, and that's why it was bringing in the snow to Virginia, parts of western North Carolina, and West Virginia. But it's only been one run that's really done this, and I'll show you the ensembles in a second. Look at what the European does. Much weaker system farther offshore. And the 18Z GFS, again, which was just released as I was recording this, didn't have this strong of a system. So we need to watch that one for early next week at the end of the weekend, because there is some subtle differences. And if by any means this is able to shift farther to the west, in other words, if that trough digs in deeper and the high pressure sets up here better, then we're going to watch this out for an East Coast storm. But at this point, given the 12Z differences between the 18Z and the GFS and then what the Europeans set it along, I think this is probably the favored track here. Now, what happens after that is taking shape on Monday. It's this low finally coming into the Pacific Northwest. And you see that it digs down through, look at this, right in through Nevada, into California, bringing in precipitation. For some in California, this will be the first time there's been precipitation this year. And that trough slides through on Tuesday, and it really takes shape right in through here. Better resolved, I think, in the European. And then look at this. This is the 16th, 17th. Now, we're pretty far out in operational run. What I'm trying to show you here is that while the details are yet to be resolved, we can see that in both models, there's going to be a system here at this time. They're both resolving it. It's in the ensembles as well. What I'm curious about is how much of the atmosphere destabilizes here. And therefore, do we have risk late next week of a severe weather outbreak? What's the extent of the cold air and the ice? Because you can see here that the models are trying to bring this back around and deliver some snow into this area. Now, this is good for working on that drought in the southern plains. And look at this. In the European, returning snow to Nebraska, desperately needed. Western Iowa, southern Minnesota, that would be an ideal situation. Now, I've broken one of the fundamental rules of forecasting, and that is I'm using operational runs to go out past, day 7, 8, 9. We shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you to watch this with me as we let this progress forward. I'll give you some numbers on total precipitation. As we let this just go out through Thursday into Friday and Saturday, really it's the clippers that come through that deliver this. A lot of this is light snow. We then again have that clipper that rolls through, and that's about all we're looking at all the way out to next Tuesday. So get an idea here. Then what you end up seeing here is that's the system that finally comes in on the southwest flow next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, possibly into Friday. That's the one I want to see. That brings moisture to places that desperately need it. So that should be the number one focus for us going forward. The European model versus the GFS, there are some differences. Like I said, the 12Z GFS was much more aggressive with the snow here. That's why it's showing up as wetter in that area. But generally speaking, around the rest of the country, you see more of the greens suggesting that the European is the wetter model right now. How about the snow side of this? Well, let's just take a look at how much snow we're expecting before that system gets here. So I'll play this on out to, let's just stop it here a week out. So this would be next Wednesday morning before that big system's taking shape. So it's the clipper systems coming through here, some lake effect snow on the cold backside of that, but we could be looking at 2 to 6 inches of snow in this area, heavier amounts on the lakes. But this is the system coming in early next week. We're going to watch return some snow to the west. We have to see if that's going to be the eventual breakdown of a significant pattern. All right, how much snow over here in North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia? Well, the European, you saw, pushes the system farther to the east, but the GFS didn't. It really wanted to bring something in there. And so even the 18Z is still trying to bring some snow, but nothing like the 12Z was in this area. So that's at least out over the same time period. What I'll do is I'll rely on the ensembles here. And this goes out 10 days. Now, you know the clipper track, we've talked about that, and the Great Lakes lake effect snow. Notice in the ensembles, that event is not showing up as well resolved, but this one is starting to show up. That could be the swath of snow we get in next week's late week winter storm system. So let's keep an eye here. We have yet to develop the full deep trough over the west to bring in a ton of snow into the west, but there is at least a shift that we have to talk about. because I've already shown you week 3 and week 4, but let's just come back to week 2, because as we play forward here through week 2, that trough goes in, but as you get all the way out there to day 12, 13, and out to day 14, this is the significant shift. There's troughing here now. There's a trough here, and therefore the flow is coming in like this, not running over a massive ridge anymore in the models. So the net effect of that is that the dryness we've seen here is peeling back with every single run. And as these troughs dip, this is the area that we're going to be seeing the most active weather out of this, the first of which will be coming out late next week with that storm system. Okay, we'll finish it up with a quick discussion on temperatures and we'll be done. So Wednesday's highs, again, very mild. And Thursday, look at this, once again, coming out of Montana into the, this section of the northern plains, very, very mild. The west, of course, stays mild as well. In fact, there were excessive heat watches in Southern California. There will be some windy conditions throughout the Central Valley with this as well. The next cold shot of air comes in, not Friday, but it comes in on Friday night into Saturday. See it there? So that's behind that first deeper trough that could make the problems over here in this part of the East Coast once we get into early next week. Because Sunday's high temperatures are much cooler across the eastern part of the country. But remember, that ridge doesn't fully break down until we get into next week. So that's why there's still quite a bit of mild air here, Sunday into Monday and even into Tuesday. What happens after that? Well, this would be day 5 through 10. And we still see the influence of the warmer pattern, but look at this. When you take all the colder air and wrap it around a trough over the Hudson Bay and over Alaska, you get a lot of zonal flow, which means we don't have the deep troughs that come across the United States. So we look out there through the middle and end of this month and still see a warmer pattern in place. So that's the main story that I wanted to convey to you tonight, and we'll get back on my normal routine for making videos on Monday. But with that, I'll wrap it up. Thanks.